Oh. Okay. Oh, jeez. Give me a million things to click. Hello, everyone. We're back. Welcome to the Perception Action Journal Club. We're back talking about Michael Turvey's lectures on perception. We're still working our way through it. Committed to make it to the end. This one was a little tough. Some of it for me.
Yes.
Anyway, especially we're doing chapter 15 and 16. Correct. It took me a while. It took me 20 minutes to convince myself this is one of the chapters. I was like, because I looked at 13 and 14. I'm like, I read that. I don't remember that. But okay. Yeah. So we're back and we're carrying on. I'm joined again by Andrew Wilson and Marianne Davies. Guys, good to see you again.
Mm-hmm.
Good to see you.
Okay. Should we barrel right ahead? So the first chapter we're going to do today is chapter 15, which is the last of 3 chapters on Gestalt, which is interesting because the kind of take on Gestalt is way beyond what I understood Gestalt to be. I think that'd be true of everyone. He really digs in deep.
Yeah, it was funny. I was going back over those chapters, and it was funny the degree to which he doesn't actually spend very much time in 13 and 14 talking about Gestalt at all. He just kind of uses them as a launch pad, as an excuse to talk about some other stuff, which is fine. It was, the framing was interesting.
Yeah. I recognize some of the names but I was like, wow, I teach Gestalt and stuff, and I wouldn't touch on any of this stuff. But I think it makes some important points. So he's talking about kind of it goes into a big detail on one of the things that do talk about. I think that most people associate with Gestalt, the 5 phenomenon, right? The idea of 5 phenomenon, if you don't know, is if I have 2 lights and I flash them here and here, right? I flash one on here, one on here. If I do it on the right, at the right rate and the right separation, it looks like one moving dot that moves back and forth. So essentially, create a completely different percept. And they're kind of he's talking about that. The biggest thing I got out of this chapter, that I think the most important thing is, maybe you guys have something different, but it really gets into a lot of the issue of ambiguity of perceptual stimulation, right? The idea that what was the term he used? Doctrine of intractable non-specificity.
Yes.
Which is
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah.
I got my dictionary out a lot on those 2 chapters.
It's the classic, starting problem with traditional theories of perception, that if you start at the retinal image, it's ambiguous, right? If that's the piece of what you have to work with, your perceptual system, then, example is if an object increases in size on your retina, did the object get bigger or is it coming at you, right? And there's a million other examples that have way more than 2 interpretations. So that is kind of the biggest thing. Did anyone else get, and talking about how the Gestalts tried to solve this?
So there was a quote in one of the earlier bits on Gestalt where it was just the goal here is to try and identify where the order and organization in perception comes from, right? Given the basic assumptions of the doctrine of intractable non-specificity, right? So the idea is where is this structure coming from? And it was interesting in the previous bits because he's setting Gestalt up as probably one of the first attempts to study and think about perception in a way that's not 100% nailed to a Cartesian program. That was kind of the setup of the previous chapters, I thought, where he's laying out that, because they were interested, they had adopted the notion of a field, and the notion of a field is quite a different notion. It's still physics doing physics, but it is different from a lot of the stuff that was coming out of Descartes and that particular approach to physics. And so he sets them up as being something a bit different. but then they're still on the hook for trying to figure out where the order and perception comes from.
Yeah.
And they still don't have a way to make the order and perception come from the stimulation.
Right.
They don't have the notion of the optic array, so they still have to impose the structure somehow.
Yeah.
They just do it with fields, and it's still brains, right? Brains are imposing the structure.
Yeah. And he calls that the CNS error, right? Is that his fundamental, one of the big things he's trying to, that order comes from the brain.
Yes.
That's his,
Yes.
that's one of the big things he's trying to shoot down here, right? Obviously, the doctrine of whatever intractable non-specificity is something Gibson is going to completely reject, absolutely, and blow out of the water. But if you start with this ambiguity problem, how do we, and I guess the five phenomena is a good example. You can't understand the percepts you get, right? If you do that five phenomena, you get very sharp transitions in percepts from two flashing lights to suddenly one light moving back and forth. You get these kind of, depending on the rate, and you can't simply through the physics describing the stimulus get to the percepts.
Yes.
I think that's what the Gestalt.
It's a continuous change in the rate or the directional and a step change in the And so the psychophysics of that don't line up without something doing some work. Yeah.
And we get categorical jumps from motion to success. Yeah. So we're starting in the same place. I think the Gestalts are, I don't know if I understand exactly how he's saying they try to solve this. In the end, I don't think they can, but it's in the brain. The brain does it.
Yeah.
Because isn't he at the end of that? I read that one a little while ago. I probably should have read it.
Yeah.
But doesn't he go back to actually then the first time he talks about the creation of an internal representation?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where's that bit?
I think that's, let me have a look.
Yeah, and then the next chapter, obviously, going to get.
Because I was like, oh, hang on a minute. Isn't this where we're trying to get away from?
The central message of Gestalt theory.
Yeah, the central message of Gestalt. Yeah. So there's a generation of a miniature virtual reality of the external world inside your head. And that's very much what's, this, I still hear a lot people talk about that. That's
literally a representation. So because I was thinking about this in the context of the set, like I was saying, the previous two chapters, the setup for Gestalt is kind of, they're starting to engage with some developments in physics that are not directly about the machine metaphor. So the notion of a field, like an electromagnetic field or a gravitational field, is different from the kind of mechanical stuff that he's getting. Turvey's constantly raging against all the mechanical stuff. And so the field thing was a step away from that into a slightly differently oriented physics, right? Less away. What does he call it? It's interaction dominant versus component dominant.
Yeah, I was going to say it's interactions and it's the program rather than the structure of the computer that my understanding what the starting
so almost
between those two.
But the setup here is almost that Gestalt is a intermediate step, like it's an initial step towards what we're going to eventually do with Gibson and the ecological book. But then it turns out that they also ran into
just get stuck
all the same problems again, even though they had. So I was trying to get a sense of like what your feelings as to like why did they walk into this problem again if they were starting from a slightly different place. Why did they walk into the?
Yeah. Is it not that does he not mention that they still stick with things like that information is basically Euclidean geometry and stuff? So they're holding on to some underlying premises that take them back down that dead end.
Yeah.
But Gibson gets rid of those completely, doesn't he? That's how he escapes it.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like it seems like they're moving in the direction. Another area, and this is on 223, Marion, you got to give them bonus points. They have a picture of a horse.
I know, and ice. And I mean, it was,
and maybe I'm wrong, but this is almost affordancy talk, right? It's talking about making things, instead of perceiving things into the physical geometry, about behavior and perceiving what you can do with things. Like, they're going, no. So,
and then he got stuck again.
Yeah.
Because Gibson's like the Gibson driving paper from the 30s.
Oh yeah, Gibson and Crooks.
Right.
Yeah.
So like even though, as I understand it, like the details of that approach might not have held up, it was that was an early kind of notion of there were affordances lurking in that field analysis of you're driving a car and steering it through things, and you have these fields of I can't remember what the phrase was, but there's
safe travel or something like
safe travel. Yeah, you describe the space in these behavioral field terms, and the idea is that you navigate as a function of where you are on those fields. So, and that was, as I understand it, 110% motivated by the Gestalt kind of field approach. It's like it was, but it's funny that yes, you're right. Like the notion of an affordance of an action possibility of what the environment affords is absolutely lurking in that analysis, and the Gestaltists missed it. Although they had elements of it again.
Yeah. It's almost like they were not willing to accept that you could get there directly. They still needed like some sort of intermediate.
Yes.
Like that's what Gibson's big, and obviously Gibson built on other people.
But it's the directness of perception is 110% the completely unique novel thing that Gibson. That's the thing, demonstrating that that's a plausible option. Based on all of this work that we've done with Turvey so far, is the thing that Gibson did that no one else had even thought to try. So maybe that was it. Maybe that was the thing they were missing, was that they had all these other notions, but they still had to get it into the organism somehow.
I'm just trying to see where it was. I read that it was like they're still holding on to, even though they were trying to get away from that dualism, they held on to that language of physics, the mechanistic, and including geometry. And then he talks at the end, doesn't he, about that sort of token, I can't even pronounce this, physicalism. That he's replaced the behavioral environment for the neurology. So that's sort of the program. Because they get so close, don't they? Well, when I saw the horse and the lady, I was like, no.
I guess why structurally, that's why the Gestalt stuff is still in the foundational concepts section. This is all the Descartes. The consequences of Descartes writing a book section, right?
Yeah.
In the end, I think the term is psychoneural isomorphism.
Yes.
In the end, weren't they arguing that somehow the neural signal was directly, like, I picture giving a stronger neural signal for a bigger object in a brighter light, and so there's some relationship between the neural signal and what you're perceiving.
But I think
maybe not that simple, but yeah.
But that
not
was
just
I think the issue was, I think that for the Gestaltists, I think the move that they made was so the ecological neuroscience kind of take these days is that what the brain is up to and the forms it takes has to do with it resonating to information. So it's the information first, and the brain's form reflects that resonance. And I think the Gestaltists are still just doing the trick of, well, actually, it's the brain first.
Yes.
And so that isomorphism is being imposed on what's coming in, as opposed to being derived from what's coming in. And so I think again, I guess maybe the limit. I think you're right. Maybe the limitation is just that they just didn't have information. They just didn't understand direct perception.
They didn't make that last leap.
And that's the trick. Even like they had, and it's interesting that they conceptually, it's interesting that they kind of got to affordances, but didn't get information, it points to the distinction between those things in terms of the roles that they play in the theory. The Gestaltists wanted something like affordances. They wanted these behaviorally relevant descriptions of the environment because it's clear that that's how we navigate it. But then they weren't. But then the behavior relevance was in some way being imposed upon the information for that.
Yeah,
because they also talked about meaning, didn't they? And I suppose in that one that it's not what we perceive in the world is what it means to us, not just what it objectively is.
Yes.
So they got close. They got close.
Yeah.
And so actually but one of the reasons they started heading in the right direction was because they were sitting on a change in physics, and that's going to be a Turvey, I think.
Yeah.
So the whole problem with the Cartesian program is physics. Turvey's claims is that by updating our physics to the 21st century stuff, that's going to give us access to impredicativity and all those annoying things that we want access to. And again, that was a really strong strand in Turvey's work, was having was trying to derive all of this from physics, trying to describe what kind of physical system could be a perceiving and acting, cognizing system.
Yeah.
And so one of the reasons, one of the reasons why the Gestaltists started doing things differently is because they picked up on the field concept, which enabled them, to the extent that they ran with it, which clearly wasn't that far, but they ran with it for a little way, and it led them to slightly different places almost immediately.
Yeah.
So that's kind of, I guess that's going to be, because again, like one of my jobs as I'm reading this is I'm trying to figure out the themes and why.
Yeah.
Turvey tells us a lot of things, and I'm trying to figure out why he's telling us things at certain given moments. And so why was he telling us all that physics from the last one about fields and all that sort of stuff? Well, why? Because it was a move away from the 17th century physics and towards the 21st century physics.
Yeah.
That's a key part of the Turvey maneuvers that are going to show up later on, I think.
Yeah. I think he's kind of telling a story here that's going along, and he's going to, I don't know. I think one of the things I think that set Gibson apart also is he was way more than a lot of these other people. He was concerned with control of action, not just perception. So Gibson was interested in how people land planes, not how people see lights flashing back and forth. Yes. That's purely perceptual problem. Even though he did his main work, he doesn't really talk about the control of action that much, Gibson.
Right.
And his main work was in perception. He was thinking. I think that's what sets him apart. I think one of the reasons he came to different conclusions than some of these, because he wasn't talking about just describing perceptual phenomena. He was talking about how you use it to control movement.
Yes.
Yeah.
And and it's funny. That's one of the and so the fact that Fodor and Polishyn didn't understand that about Gibson is one of the things that Turvey et al. In the 1981 paper pinged Fodor and Polishyn on. They're saying, look, Fodor and Polishyn are busy trying to tell a story about how perceptual experience comes about, whereas Gibson is trying to tell a story about how action comes about. You're absolutely right. That once you realize that those things have to be the same, or at least work that perception.
It has to. That's the purpose of perception.
Right? The purpose of perception is not perceptual experience. The purpose of perception is not making a judgment about something. Yeah.
No. Yeah. Phenomena.
He says that bit in 221, doesn't he? I've just a quick look that they didn't go past the brain. They got they kind of got stopped there rather than moving on to what's.
You're like we said, they're getting there. Like in the horse example, they're talking about ice being a surface of support. So they're talking about what I can do with it a little bit, but they just didn't quite. Not just having a certain temperature and it's Well, can I walk across it? Yeah.
That was it. The bit I got from there was almost more about categorization and being able to tell the difference between water in its liquid form and water in its ice form, which would go to affordances, but they don't do that. They get stuck on categorization rather than on what you can do with it. It stays in in them. How do we work out what something is and what categories? It was my interpretation of that.
Well, that's interesting. So yes, they do get stuck on categorization, which is not what perceiving and affordance is. So there's a sidebar in Gibson 79 that Vicente and Ed Baggs are very excited about. And it's this: to perceive an affordance is not to classify it, or something, I think is the title of the sidebar.
That's it. They got stuck on classification.
Yes, categorization, classification, all those things. Absolutely. And if you get stuck on thinking that that's what's going on, if the goal of, if perceiving an affordance is simply to categorize and classify the world, then it stops in the brain. But that's not what perceiving an affordance is. That's interesting, isn't it? Because the degree to which, again, I keep coming back to this, the degree to which reading this has made me realize what a radical Gibson was, in the sense of what a complete break he introduces to hundreds of years of thinking about this. It's a complete separation of none of that's working. We're going to do this qualitatively different thing now. It's wild.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like the Gestalts were saying, they sort of got a little in that direction, but not even close. And then the next chapter, we're going to actually go backwards, right? We're talking about computation and representation. So we're going further away in the other direction. So, I agree. That's obviously, but so I think it's an interesting message.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting again, because the Gestalt guys were also, it's funny, just sort of think historically. So Gibson makes this radical shift, and because one of the other thing about Gibson is that his incessant and his complete inability to stop, right? He never just goes, I figured it out and this is where I'm going to ride for a while. He just keeps asking questions and poking it. But and the Gestalt guys were also kind of, they were outsiders as well from the mainstream. So they had that kind of like plucky little outsider kind of thing. But for some reason, and again, I'm just kind of going off this, I don't really think they had that last little piece where they just kept poking it. They kind of got to a point where they had some pieces and then they just ran with them and never changed any of the fields. It is just behavioral fields or neural fields or whatever.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Maybe they just didn't think that maybe they did. Maybe they just thought it was working.
Yeah.
But I think Gibson just had to make that, I think, that complete break, because the categorizing information takes you back into describing it in these more mechanistic or geometric. It pushes you down there, or it stops you escaping it, I think.
Yes.
Which Gibson managed to, because he went somewhere very differently, so didn't he? I think that's what my understanding of that's what got them stuck. I was just going to have a quick look and see if there's anything in the chat. I'm not connected to the chat, but I can read it, but I can't answer.
Nothing too much yet. Yeah, just Danny saying hello. Hi, Danny. So when you guys are talking about categorization, so we don't categorize this. If I look around my office, I don't categorize the world in terms of sit-onable and not sit-onable, right?
No.
In fact, I don't actually perceive the not sit-onable. I don't perceive that. That's not a negative affordance. I just perceive something different that offers. It's not like binary categories of, opposites. Yeah. I look around, I perceive things that are offered. And most things have multiple affordances. I could climb my bookshelf. It depends on what I want to do, right? What my intentions are. They're totally going to change from moment to moment when I look at it. What am I trying to do? Yeah.
I know we're not at chapter 16 yet, but almost all the way through that, so I'm going, there's no motivation or intention is missing from all of this. It's the bit that really shouted at me.
Yeah. So do you want to jump to that?
I don't mind.
I think we got more of that Gestalt chapter than I thought we would. It's kind of, even Turvey said it's going to be really short one.
Short.
The lecture 16 is we're getting into computation, and one of Andrew's favorite topics, representation. Talking about there's a bunch of Fodor. I don't know where it's interesting tack to talk about, for me to talk about in terms of language first, computation in terms of language. I don't,
Well, it's symbol manipulation.
Yeah. So
AI.
Yeah.
I was thinking AI as we go through that, which is where it goes, isn't it?
Yeah.
With
That's what
and symbol manipulation.
Well, that's and this, of course, is one of the problems with AI systems as they are right now, is that they're made entirely of language, and cognition, perceiving, and acting are not made of language. In fact, our ability to do language probably isn't made of language, right? So that's one of the problems, is if they're trying to build cognition out of language. Language is one of the things you can do if you can do a bunch of other things, but it's not what everything's made of. But language, spoken language, you're right. There's a real drive to, Fodor's whole language of thought, and trying to find the language in which these things occur, even if that's a mathematical language. It all boils down to language is symbol manipulation, right? It's a syntax. It's a set of symbols. It's a syntax for them, the rules that you're allowed to put them together, and the associated semantics and use of those things. And so, Turvey's been alluding to symbol manipulation.
Yes.
A lot, sometimes more and sometimes less directly, but symbol manipulation as one of the key things that just comes out of the Cartesian program. You just end up in symbol manipulation territory as your solution to the problem. Has been alluded to all the way through this. And of course, then the argument, I'm pretty sure, is just going to be, all the fancy computational apparatus that we throw at it these days, since the 50s when they developed, all these theories of computing, it's powerful. It's a powerful symbol manipulation system. It can do all kinds of things. It's just the same. As it's always, like, it's not the new thing. Yeah.
No. Yeah, and he gets. I don't know if he's getting into the loans of intelligence, on here, right? Where does this symbol manipulation come from?
Yes.
Right? Where do you, like, he talks about learning a language, and the two different, learning to speak English for a Portuguese person, and how they, how it's kind of
Yes.
Say really explicitly something like, you can't learn something unless you already know it, and you can't know it unless you've learned it. I mean, he was quite explicit about that circular learn on intelligence there, wasn't he? And then, but he did he not just before then talk, when he was talking about language, that he did talk a little bit around things like rules of grammar, which would allow for the generation of something somewhat unique, like each sentence would be different, but it's based very much on prior knowledge. It's just that you could produce something slightly different because it's got rules.
This is just poverty of stimulus. Just poverty of stimulus.
Ballistic, The
notion that language has structure and organization. Where does that structure and organization come from? Well, it can't come from the raw material, because the raw material doesn't have that structure and organization. The structure and organization must have been imposed on it by something, and that's the only way you can get up and running. And it's the phrase poverty of stimulus, as far as I remember, came from Chomsky talking about language before anybody applied it to perception, even though it's the same basic argument, right? That specific phrase of poverty of stimulus is a Chomsky thing, as far as I know.
Yeah.
But again, it's like, it just, where did all this organization come from? Where did this order come from in our behavior, given the raw material is crap? And nobody goes, well, is the raw material actually terrible? They all just go, no, it's definitely terrible. How do we impose order on it? And again, it's just the same damn thing, one after the other.
Yes, it's just a different way. Yeah, you're right, Anna. At the heart, it's the ambiguity problem, impoverished stimulation. How do we get out of that?
Yep.
So I'm trying to read Greg Spence. Hi, Greg. Greg's comments. That's what I'm just like looking in. I had a friend coming. I'll be back in a sec. I'm going to have a dog bark if I don't.
It's
all good complexity.
So I think it's just moving the same problem into modern, obviously changing tools and changing ways to think about it.
But it's important to recognize this. Like, I think one of the really valuable things that's coming out of this book is just the firm and inescapable embedding of modern theories of perception in the Cartesian program, and just saying that and just identifying that it's not actually different just because it's using Bayes' theorem, just because it's using, because it's got access to more computational power or a slightly more sophisticated theory of computing. Like, and even though those things have provided successes, right? The theory of computing has given us computers which can do lots of different things, right? They are general purpose machines, right? My laptop is currently enabling me to talk and interact with you guys, but a little while ago was enabling me to do some word processing. And a little bit before that was letting me check my email. So computers can be general purpose things that use the same architecture to let you do general stuff. And that sounds like what you need for cognition. But but I think a lot of the discussion in modern times has been that the theory of computation was somehow a key breakthrough that will bust us out of all the problems of history and solve them by virtue of this sophisticated mathematical apparatus that we now have access to. And this whole book, and frankly, really the whole pitch of the ecological approach is no, it's not
the same stuff over. It's like, Bayes' theorem is the same. You start with a guess because the world is ambiguous. That's your prior. You update your prior, but like that's the same.
And then where did
the guess come from?
Yeah. That's why I think. I always argue these two are so different because they start with completely different assumptions and run off in different directions. Like at the most base level, right? Is the stimulus for perception ambiguous or not? That's completely changes. You go down completely different paths, all the way up to action, right? And how you coach from to the bottom of perception. And
that, I think, for me, I think about it, that starts, all the way through evolution. So I would say even your knee has got some kind of perception because it's part, like my knee, mine definitely has, like I know when it's going to hurt or if something feels unstable. It's just like there is. So I think we got maybe, and this is a very human centric perspective, started at a human being as the perceiving, moving, and cognizing being, rather than starting right from the beginning and thinking, would cognition work for all things? And if you start there, then it's about evolving to have some kind of apparatus that allows us to resonate with information, the information that matters to that organism or part of an organism, which is a completely different place to start, isn't it?
For sure.
Yes.
So we don't see ultraviolet light. We don't, like it's still there, but it does. We didn't need to become attuned to it to be able to move and operate. So, there's a whole. I just think they started in just such a different place. That gives them.
Yeah.
Then he goes into information, Shannon's information theory, which again is built on uncertainty, right? It's built on the kind of ambiguity, right? That's what Shannon means by information.
Yeah,
reduction of uncertainty.
So it's like it's a form of entropy, but isn't that what AI large language models use? This is the most likely word to come after this word. Yeah. It doesn't know what it means or whether it's right. It's just like I'm reducing the Shannon information statistically. This is the most likely word to follow this word in this context.
It's funny. I've been thinking. Yes, you're right. Because AI is effectively just it's taking advantage of a huge data set within which there is a lot of syntactical structure.
Yeah.
And it's writing that syntactical structure.
Mm-hmm.
And the semantic work has all been done by the people that generated the sentences in the first place.
Yes.
But the only thing the AI system really is interacting with is actually the resulting syntactical structure. And so that's the only thing it works with, and that's its only raw material. It is interesting that you can do as much as you can do with these AI systems just by navigating that syntactical space. But it also points to the fact that those systems are always going to make the mistakes that they make because they're features, not bugs of the architecture, right? Yeah, don't get me started on AI. We'll be here all day.
My favourite is, I mean, I know it's probably quite a long time ago, Alison Gopnik, when she was, you were aware of Alison's work? Yeah. And she wrote an article, I think it was in my New York Times or something, quite a long time ago. It was something like that. So it wasn't academic, but it was from her work that was titled something like "Why Computers Will Never Be as Smart as a 5-year-old." Or there were, and again, it was because there's no movements, interaction, and emotion.
But there's no embodiment, there's no motion, there's no action, there's actually no perception. They're just, this is it. They're just made of language. This gets back to this, languages of thought and all that, and these simple manipulation systems. The idea that if cognition in general is symbol manipulation, then you should be able to build one of these AI systems to do something, because symbol manipulation is the thing that they're awesome at, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And so, right. I mean, and this is the tenuous basis of all the giant claims that everybody makes about AI systems, that and the rest of it's just nonsense. But that was always kind of but then, we've had this argument in the literature already, and it was already heading away from symbol manipulation being the key, right? Good old-fashioned artificial intelligence was already seen to be a bit dead in the water. That was the whole symbols versus parallel
neural network and
neural networks and all that sort of stuff. That was all
all the connectionism stuff, the process networks and things.
So they had already moved. Connectionism is connectionism not symbol manipulation. It's a little bit more dynamical. It's a little bit more still computational, and it's still but it's a little bit different than symbol and those. And we'd all everybody had already kind of agreed, I think, that these things were falling apart. But then it came back just because the computers and the symbol manipulators got more powerful, and the data sets got bigger, and there is structure in those data sets, right? And so, but it's just syntactic structure. It's not semantic structure. It's not actually interesting. And so, and again, keep coming back to this, right? The central question is where does the organization and behavior come from? There is organization and behavior, right? And so, for large language models, the organization of their behavior comes from the fact that the giant language data sets they have has an organization and a structure. But where did that organization come? Came from people using language, right? And in a variety of forms. Well, how did the people get it? That's the actually interesting, that's the psychological. And then Scholtes, it was like, no, it was their brains imposing the structure. And everybody keeps coming back to the fact that the structure that we see in behavior has to be imposed by something, right? And that's going to be the flip, because the raw material is so rubbish.
And for me, that
you get to say symmetry. You get to say that shows up in
and you
perception. Sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say
go.
Stuck on, when you go, okay, well, what about how a worm learns to move around, or a pre-language child even, because you've got something, they don't have, I don't believe they have a language of thought that's complex enough to impose.
They must have, or else they couldn't possibly be able to make not know language unless you already know language of some sort, right? But again, that's when I say it like that, and it sounds absurd, but the notion of a language of thought is that over evolutionary time, you've accumulated some understanding and being able to put together a foot in the door. But it's effectively like it, right? Again, it's the symbol grounding problem. That it's just another version of the symbol grounding problem. And the symbol grounding problem is, right, I have a symbol. Why does it mean what it means? I have to connect those two things somehow. And anything that's symbolic, anything that has symbol, needs to be grounded in order to be useful. And there's always a problem of grounding these things. And in language, we do it just by sort of by convention, right? That thing means something because we've all sort of agreed that when I say that thing, I mean this thing. But then representations and mental states and all that neural dynamics, if they're all symbol systems, they all need to be grounded. And how do they do it? Well, maybe evolution does it and provides that structure. But again, it just boils down to the fact that
same problems. Yeah.
You can't build. The problem is that you need structure and organization in your nervous system to impose it on this disorganized input. But if your input doesn't contain the structure, where does your goddamn structure come from? Right?
Yeah.
And this is what, Berkeley, and then they used to give up and say, God, because it was hard, right? And saying that language of thought develops over evolutionary time is just the modern version of saying, well, I can't do it now, but I could do it if you gave me several million years of tinkering and luck, right?
Yeah. I think, he's making the point through all these chapters. The problem is not that people aren't smart enough or have the right tools or whatever. The problem is when you start with this assumption, you create this completely intractable problem. This is that the information is impoverished. You put yourself in a corner. There's no way out, right? That's why, you need someone to come along and say, well, maybe it's not. And also, when you're talking about, obviously that was a big thing for Gibson, meaning. Where does meaning come from? Meaning, not imposed, right, by some convention or something.
Yeah. And we get into
meaning
that.
Meaning is direct.
Yeah. And that, I think, just because chapter 16 then gets into things like, all the experiments around how many bits of information there are in short-term memory and what you can remember, but they're all bits of meaningless gobbledygook. It's not even, So again, it's separated completely from meaning. It was about how many random words that didn't mean anything or bits of light that don't mean anything.
It's a thing that immediately comes with symbol systems. If you're dealing with symbol manipulation and symbol systems, then there is the syntax question and there is the semantics question, and those two things are different questions, right? So Chomsky's got his famous colorless green ideas sleep furiously sentence. It's syntactically correct for an English sentence, but semantically it's nonsense. And, this is just supposed to be a demonstration of the fact that syntax and semantics are not the same thing and can be sort of manipulated independent of one another. And the idea, and it is funny, like, people like Pinker and all those big names and innate language and all that sort of stuff, and Chomsky and kind of linguistics spend most of their time talking about the origins of syntax. Why? Because syntax is just a thing that symbol systems, you can develop a syntax without solving the grounding problem is what you can actually do, right? So modern AI, LLMs, are able to take advantage of the structure in their data sets to produce a syntax, but they have no semantics going on whatsoever. So given enough training and given enough time, you can get to syntax is the easy problem. That's why everyone talks about it. But you're absolutely right. And it's funny that Gibson, again, just when the actual problem is semantics, the actual problem is meaning. Let's see if we can solve that.
It really reminded me of the frustration that I get pulled into in my early motor learning research, the idea that it had to be a novel motor program that somebody is producing, even if it's little. And nowadays I think about that as like movement gibberish. It was like the 3-letter random word in the memory short-term memory experiments that is utterly meaningless. Movement. That's it.
So I think like the DAX and all the language experiments, this is it. right?
I remember looking at some of them and thinking, my 2-year-old can press buttons. He might not get the right gap in it, but he can sit on his bum and press a button. That's not a novel movement. But because there was a specific gap, it was deemed completely novel, and somebody would be learning something from scratch. But it also, like, nobody's motivated to do that, you know, unless it was for course credits as an undergrad. But so it was, so motor gibberish was what I'd, after looking at that. But it's back in this same thing about us learning something that's separated from meaning, context, embedded, embodied.
Yeah, I think when you say the syntax versus semantics, I think of like programming, right? Coding. Like the reason I learned, I'm moving to Python now the last few days. It's just learning the syntax, right? The reason I can do that is because I understand the semantics of how coding works, right?
Yeah.
It's just learning what specific word to use for this. What curly brackets to place where. Like
exactly.
It's just symbol. That's not the hard part. No, it's really interesting, you know.
So it is. It is funny though that, because the other thing, right. Why is there going to be a third of this book dedicated to the computational approach? Well, it might just be the same thing dressed up in new packaging, but it has been going on for quite a long time, and it is powerful, right? Like the Shannon information theory and Turing's theories of computation, all that stuff is if you're going to, it's kind of like if you're going to do symbol manipulation, this is the powerful way to do it, right?
Yeah.
And it's evidenced by the fact that the invention of the computer and everything that followed in terms of the explosion of technology and the uses for these things, right? So it's going to have all these flaws sitting underneath it, and it's never going to be able to get away from these flaws because they are baked in. However, which is going to be, and the reason why we're going to have to spend quite a bit of time engaging with it, I think, is just we're going to have to remember that it is a really good faith attempt to throw the most powerful tools that we've so far figured out in this way of doing things at the problem framed in a particular way. So it's a really, like, it's good faith, and it's trying to use really powerful tools, right, to solve the problem. And the only mistake it's made is that it's got the wrong problem, right?
Because the problem is the interpreter, isn't it? The problem is that we have to have an interpreter somewhere in the system, which he brings into the little man in the room, doesn't he? Yeah. And I think Gestalt my understanding was that Gestalt chapter introduced the interpreter somehow into this. And again, because there's this idea that the information is meaningless or impoverished in terms of movement, and so in our brain there must be something that can interpret both our movement and perception. And that's why it's indirect.
Yeah, and I think you're pointing it right. And obviously, this is also the most powerful and dominant metaphor for what our brain does and how perception and cognition works. Computer, right? We're the most powerful supercomputer is up here. That's been what we believe for a long, long time, right?
Yeah.
Our best way of understanding what our brain does, it does supercomputing, right? And so that I think you have to give it a good, it makes sense that we made that move.
Yeah, well, I mean, I remember encountering this when Springer and I were working on the ecological representations paper. I read some of the older Newell stuff, some of the papers that were from around that time, and a couple of papers that were later by Newell, sort of reflecting on the development of these ideas and the excitement that psychologists felt when theories of computing arrived and they started to understand the implications of it. The excitement that they felt, that they were like, oh my God, this might actually be the solution. This is a formal set of tools for doing the kind of thing we're pretty sure we have to do, and it's a formal set of tools with a sort of a completeness and a utility and a power that we've never had access to before. And so, like, people that like they were thrilled,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Like it's so again, it's kind of like just have to to give this approach its due.
Yeah.
It's not the dominant paradigm for no good reason.
Yes.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're going to have to engage with it, whether we like it or not. Like I've worked very hard these days. I try not to write papers in which I first lay out the computational approach and then these days I try to jump straight into the ecological one because I think we've done it. But at the same time, under the hood and in the background, we still have to engage with this stuff. And so maybe, I don't know, what I'm hoping is that by the time we get through all those sections, we will have kind of revealed that in this book is kind of everything we need to say, maybe, fingers crossed. And maybe we can just go, this is why if you want to understand why ecological psychologists think you're wrong, it's these 8 chapters or whatever it is. Read those. That's why we're mad at you. And then we can carry on. So hopefully maybe that's what's going to develop as we go through these is the articulation of the problem that we owe the universe, we owe the world a clear articulation of why we think this is doomed to fail for all the reasons that have been articulated.
For understanding how we move, cognize, and perceive, but it's very powerful for other things. I mean, it's much better at maths than I'll ever be. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
It does some stuff really, really well where there is a relationship and it is about computation. It's a simple problem. So,
that's why.
It's not. It's in that specific context of understanding us that it's.
Yes. No. I agree that it's not a good way to understand us, but I do think it's important that we recognize that a lot of people had at the beginning, and presumably still do, good faith reasons for thinking that it was in fact going to be an excellent solution for how we go about perceiving and acting and cognizing, because it was a set of tools that fully fronted up to the problem the way they were framing it. But again, it's just not. It's going to miss all the points, and it's going to have all the same problems and everything. Yeah.
No, I agree. So I'm trying to do the same myself. I would like to get to the point where I can just talk about ecological, without ever having to explain the alternative. Yes. The other thing I hope people, is that the two are radically different approaches.
Yeah.
I hate there's still this common. Well, no, you can combine them. You can't combine two opposite assumptions, right? Yeah. It's not possible. And I know you've said things like this before, and I do get lots of people who do this, and I go, because I think I don't know if it's maybe less offensive, but it's like saying one view is saying the world's flat and the other saying no, it's round. Sure. You can't say the sensible option then is to believe that it's both simultaneously, because that makes no sense.
Yeah. Or worse, to sometimes believe it's flat and sometimes
depending on what the problem is, which is what I call this, if you've got a garden shed problem or a satellite problem. If you're building a garden shed, it doesn't make any difference. You're still going to be flat, isn't it? But if you're putting a satellite into orbit, it matters which one you believe.
Yeah. Even like that system, how would that work? You need some overseeing system to monitor. Okay, this is a direct perception situation. This is which it makes it indirect, right?
Which makes it indirect,
right? So any system that has an indirect component is an entirely indirect system, right? Yeah. That's the point of
Well, and so Jeff Bingham my PhD supervisor, always used to talk about the one example of this is if you're the distinction between perception and memory, for example. Mm-hmm. And sort of, and his analogy is, you're watching someone walk behind a picket fence, and so they're in view, they're out of view, they're in view, they're out of view. Are you going perception, memory, perception, memory, and how do you switch, right? So you have to have a reason to switch. You have to have a system monitoring the switching and implementing the switching. And so no, the suggestion is it's perception. Because you perceived the occluding event, right? And and anyway, so on. It's just again, it just gets to that idea of as soon as you've got two systems that have different rules, then you have to have a reason to switch between them. You have to have something to drive the switching, and all you've done is made the problem worse, right?
Yeah.
And I know this is the endless argument in the sports coaching literature about all of this kind of stuff. But just this is why.
Yeah. It's the same thing. Like, how do I return a tennis serve? Base, towel. Towel. That's what a lot of people want to pose. Want to argue, right?
Yes.
Probabilistic base, towel. Like, it doesn't make any sense, right?
Wow.
What is the problem called when something goes out of sight? And you know what it is, because they talk about it with small babies. I'm trying to remember back to my first year undergrad, which was a long time ago. But animals do that. You know, my dog and my horse know if they see somebody go out of sight. Permanence. Yeah, they know. My dog definitely does, because he's a collie. Yeah. Movement is his thing. He knows exactly where it's likely to reappear.
Yeah, it's one of the. I think it's Piaget's, right, stages of development.
That's it, Piaget.
Kids recognize that. Yeah, you didn't disappear when you do this.
When you did that,
it's permanence. Yeah, object permanence.
Not a human thing.
No. Yeah. So, but so that's the big thing. You know, I hope to. I want people to it's still rife out there, but and I like also it's fundamentally we're talking about science, but fundamentally it's essentially a belief, right? It's based on a belief. Do you believe the information is published? Do you believe it isn't? Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
You can kind of provide evidence to support, illusions to support it's impublished.
The preferred term is ontology, Rob. Like we don't just have beliefs. I have an ontology. It's much more impressive, right?
Yes, I know. People always get at me. It's not belief, it's science.
I mean, reading chapter 16, there's a bit of it. Again, it was like reminding me of some of my undergraduate, because it gets back to that categorization, isn't it? You think, God, this just gets far more confusing than it needs to be. Like how many different ways, how many different rules, how are you going to know what it is? Because you have to have all these rules. The complexity that sits behind that basically Gibson allows us to escape from, because you don't need, all these different hypotheses that allow you to categorize something and then represent it so much.
Turvey talks about that in the previous chapters about Gestalt, where he's talking about exploring the mechanical hypothesis, and how if you take a mechanical view, you end up having to postulate atoms, but also these caloric atoms that do the work of providing heat and doing all. And so you get into this situation where you've got this basic idea, and then you keep having to add pieces in, these hypothetical structures effectively that are doing work. And it's like, well, I can clearly see the thing is melting and the atoms are moving apart. So something made them move apart. So I need a thing to do the moving, right? And then you've got that, and then you say, well, then I need a medium for them to move through, or whatever, right? And just that, it's funny, just as you were describing that, every time you come across these, you need another piece and another piece and another piece. That's exactly what Turvey was saying a couple of chapters ago. It was just an inevitable side effect of taking this mechanical approach. You just end up layering things in.
Yeah, and I think I think Gibson recognized categorization is useless for controlling action. Like I always say, like if a batter perceives it's a fastball, not a curveball, all you've done is moved it from an event in the real world to an event in my head. I perceived it was one of these two things. I perceived it as one of these two things. What do I do now?
Yeah.
How did that get me any further? Actually acting on it? It didn't. But I need some fancy system that looks up or has some memory or whatever. Right? Yeah. So. People are talking about a couple comments about cognitive load theory and issues.
And this goes back to our 7 bits of information plus or minus 2 again, doesn't it, from the last Gestalt thing, and that what type of information? Yeah.
So I have a lecture that I give my students about memory, and we talk about 7 plus or minus 2, and then you immediately talk about chunking, because you can change what counts as an item.
Yeah.
So you have these chess experts holding multiple games in their supposedly in their working memory. And each game becomes a thing, so they can hold 7 plus or minus 2 games of chess, right? So, crudely, but the elasticity of
what
counts as an item in short term, like it's ridiculous the degree of elasticity that was allowed in order for that 7 plus or minus 2 to even.
I think about it as like basically attention, that it's an attentional demand. I don't know if that's your view. And so, for example, you can attend to more, or you're more attentive, if it's familiar, if you're motivated to pay attention to it. But for example, highly stressed, your attention, like what you can pay attention to or what you focus on is going to diminish. And that attention can also go for example, now with my knee injury, if I'm doing squats, I'm paying attention to the internal, what my knee is feeling.
Yes.
Deliberately, because that's important information to me. So I always think about it now as attention. How much, what I can attend to, that's the bandwidth, not chunks in working memory.
I think of it in terms of information too, right? A novice remembers the rook is two spaces up and 3 spaces to the right, using very low level information to remember. An expert is remembering the spatial relationships between a whole, they're perceiving some higher order information, which is more direct, more, that's
So it's perception of information rather than something inside your head that you're pulling out.
It's the same people, like your relative phase experiments, right?
Yeah.
When people try to remember where one hand control where one hand is relative to the other, it's very hard to do weird things. The information that's terrible information to use. It's low level versus when you give them a display like a metronome, visual metronome display, you're giving them higher order, different source of information, and they can learn to do it.
Information that is directly relevant to the control of the action as well, right?
To relative phase.
It's meaningful, right? Like it's meaningful information.
Okay. Well, we made it through our first. We're gonna get more. We have a few more chapters next on getting into the complication. I would have loved. I haven't read this book in so long. I would love to get Turvey's take on Bayes and active inference. I don't know if he wrote anything on that.
I was thinking about that. I would have loved to have known. I mean, he may have done. It was certainly
active interest is interesting because it's taken the problem a little bit, because it's solved the ambiguity problem by trying to change what you're trying to perceive, or you're trying to predict or perceive, right? I'm not trying to predict an event in the outside world. I'm not trying to match this to the proximal. I'm trying to match proximal to proximal for different given events. You know what I mean? You're trying to predict the sensation you would receive, and then I guess it's sort of the same, but
The thing I find really intriguing about active inference and free energy principle stuff is that there are 2 interpretations that seem to be completely consistent internally for what it all means. And one interpretation is that it's an implementation of Helmholtz, and one of is that it's an implementation of Gibson stuff. So there are people who have done, ecological stuff. Bruneberg and et al. Have done sort of a lot of stuff on free energy principle and ecological framing for stuff. And Kristen, of course, doesn't help, because if you just ask him a question, he just agrees with whatever.
And he can't understand what he means.
He's just he refuses to but it's the thing that's always intrigued me about active inference is apparently there are groups of people who are firmly convinced it implements Helmholtz really well and solves their problems, and there's a group of people who think it's got a perfectly coherent ecological interpretation, and those 2 groups I don't think talk to one another, or they don't agree with one another, and a lot of the arguments are around those things. But the fact that people think that this single framework can accommodate 2 things that we've just identified as being different root and branch makes me suspicious that something weird is going on, and I've never quite been able to put. I don't know whether it's Helmholtzian and the ecological people are wrong, or vice versa, or whether something else is going on. I don't know what the problem is, but there is a problem.
I don't understand it well enough to.
And I think I point out for those that are screaming, no one is proposing it can accommodate both at the same time.
No.
It's not combining, right? It's either or, right? So everyone that keeps pushing for that, it's not an indirect and direct perception theory.
But it's the same apparatus, right?
Yes,
so it's the same mathematical apparatus is either indirect or direct.
Or direct.
And I'm
that's why I would love to hear where Turvey would put it in here.
Yeah.
Is it just another computational symbol manipulation, or is it something fundamentally different?
I mean,
I don't know the answer to that myself. Yeah.
It's gotten more interesting in terms of its physics, certainly, and the physics it depends on and the things it approaches. It doesn't have a notion of information, so that's probably to fall over.
But it does embrace complexity, self-organization, entropy, all those things, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Magda, is it Magda? I can't remember. I can't pronounce his name.
Yeah.
He doesn't like it.
Yeah.
Oh yes. There is one. Yes, I can't remember his name either.
Magda. I can't pronounce his name. Yeah. So there's some people who've looked into it in more detail, who are more ecological, who don't. But I'd have to. I haven't got the brain space. I need to finish my thesis before I even think about it.
Yeah.
I have a not deep enough understanding to.
I don't see it as having the clear implications for what we do, like coaching. Like ecological dynamics is a very clear path from ecological psychology.
Mangalam, thank you. That's it. It's Mangalam. Yeah.
He has lots of he's cranking the paper out per day. It seems.
I know.
He's doing lots of. Yeah.
I don't know how he does that. I don't think, from what I've seen, I think it either it or in its interpretation muddies the water. There's definitely some people who think that it allows you to combine both. That's what it's offering is this ability to.
That's a big point.
Have your cake and eat it. I think that's a perception.
If that's the case, then that's a real problem for the family.
It is a problem.
Because we're fully committed here to this notion that these two things are just irreconcilably different from one another. That's an important, you have to, it's one of the things you have to front up to if you're going to engage with this, is that these things are different.
So many people won't, right? They think it's just we just stick to it because Gibson said so. Right? It is a fundamental different, right? It's like saying something is black or white, right? It's a possible, So
that might not be the best example. Having
I know. I was thinking you were going to say gray. As soon as I said
I think you'll find that white makes no sense as a constant.
So I messed that one up. Delete, edit.
Delete that. I think the other thing that that's maybe stopping me from putting as much effort into it at the moment is I can't see what it would add to an ecological perspective for what we're, I think it just adds more complexity and I don't think it helps. I think, so even if it wasn't used as an excuse to try and have your cake and eat it or mix the two together, I can't see that it gives anything at the moment.
That was my take on Yala's papers when they first started to come out. I got the real sense that the free energy principle needed ecological psychology more than we needed them. And I still and I saw that, you might be able to put them together, but it wasn't clear that it added value to us. It was clear that we could add value to them if it held up. But I agree entirely. The same.
Yeah, me too. And the hypocrisy of it. Affordance and regeneracy, those are too complicated. But free energy, that's easy to understand. Like free energy and feed forward Bayesian predictive model. Okay.
And Markov blankets.
Any coach can figure that out immediately.
It's a cake, right? Any coach will be able to understand.
They know what free energy is. I still couldn't give you a probably solid, a kind of understanding, but it's a pretty complicated thing.
I know, right?
So we'll tackle that another day. But thanks everyone. That was fun. We made it some different.
I'm glad I'm glad it wasn't just me who read those two and went.
Me too. I was like,
I shouldn't have had a break.
No, I don't. I think it would have been no matter. Well, it probably did hurt a little bit, but especially chapter 16. Woo, it'd make my head hurt, but it's good stuff. So, all right. So we'll be back some point in the future. We'll get the next one scheduled, probably maybe slightly more regularly. Now we're back.
Yeah, that's fine.
We're off summer break. We're going to finish it. We only have a few more chapters, and then when we get to talking about the ecological perspective. Woo! Finally, yeah, exciting part. Yeah. So.
Thank
Yeah,
God
Greg's just written that Bethente and Melandras are probably better places to start for understanding.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then just got a pretty clear view on a lot of these things, and Mel's work was really interesting. So
maybe we'll finish this just in time. And there's a rumor that they're trying to put Michael Turvey's lectures on action into a book.
okay.
Yeah, he had a course that he did, right? And
I knew it was.
I think he just started. I don't know. When I was at Connecticut, they were talking about.
Oh, cool.
All the materials are there to do it.
I was pretty sure that was always the plan.
Yeah.
Do this and then do lectures on
action.
But then obviously he died, and so
yeah.
Presumably Claudia maybe has taken that on.
Yeah, so I'm not sure where that stands, but the rate we're going, maybe it'll be done.
That would be brilliant.
I would assume he's going to explain his interpretation of Bernstein and all. That would be so awesome to read.
That would be, yeah.
And all in coordinated structures and all the things Michael Turvey brought to. I just did in my new book. I went through the inertia work, inertia tensor, and all that. It's very cool, very amazing.
Nice.
Yeah, it's not always the easiest, but it's worth it. I would say
it's always worth it. Yeah, absolutely.
Excellent science. He just thinks through things so deeply. Everything. So, all right, guys.
Amazing.
Well, thanks everyone for joining us, and we'll see you in a little while. There we go. Did it stop?